Doesn't say. So just for anyone who is watching this on YouTube, I accidentally had my microphone muted for the first hour of class. So yeah, I guess we're gonna now have this working. Yes?
Is the product supposed to give you a error?
Yes. So the reasoning for that is I'll explain this for you too. So right now with the way that we've set up our products routes is it's not actually /products that it's looking for. It's actually /products/products. So if you were to type in that right now, because in our app.js we're using, so on the route /products, we're using our router object that's right here. But then this information of /products is then duplicated into our products route. So we're actually putting this information in twice, whereas we don't need to. So you could either choose in your app, you could either make it so that on / it uses our products router, or you can have it on products and not have to have that information there. I prefer this method. I think it cleans it up a little bit, so that way you don't have these big long strings of the pathing. But yeah, so hopefully that answers your question on why you're getting a 404. So if you just change that will should fix that. So now that we've set up, we have home, about us, contact. We don't have anything for products. We could probably just add in that into our nav bar. So I'm going to quickly do that by going into our layout, copying that, pasting a link for products, and putting /products there. So again, we have products, contact us, about us, and home. So does anyone have a preference on which page that we're going to put information into? We can either do about us, contact, or we can start with products. We might do all of them by the end of the day anyway, so. But start from the beginning, sure. So we'll do about us. So about us, we could, if we wanted to, we could attach a photo, but we're just gonna do like some kind of like basic information about ourselves, maybe like what our birth date is or how old we are, where we live, like city and stuff like that. So the first thing I'm gonna do, just because if you guys are familiar with Bootstrap, is in our About Us, I'm going to wrap everything in a container. And what a container does is instead of being a full width, it pushes it more into the center and just gives us a little bit of padding to play with. So in here, I'm going to put a h2 and say, hi, my name is. And then in Pug, there's a couple different ways that you can reference variables. So in the index page, you can see here that they use an equals. And what the equals does is immediately following the h1, it wants to put in the variable of title. So if I were to actually remove the equals, it would actually only render the actual text of title. That's how it knows to use that variable. But sometimes you want to take a variable and put it with additional text, in which case that's where we use this pound symbol and wrap it with curly braces, and then we put in the variable that we're using. So there's a couple different ways that you can reference variables. So inside or about us, we're going to put, hi, my name is, and then we're going to use the pound symbol, squiggly brackets, name. And if you were to render that, as I said earlier, because we're not passing it anything that's called name, name doesn't have a value. So it doesn't actually render anything. But let's go into that file for about us, which is in our index route. You can see right here we have about us, we have title, and we're going to add a name. So this is what is basically a JSON object, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, where the first part is what is called a key, and then the second part is the value. So we're going to pass what is called name, and this is where you can just put in your name. And that will automatically be pushed to our pug file, and we don't have to make any changes. So if I were to refresh this, now it says that my name is Chris Naismith. So some other information that we could put, I'll use an H4 and say, I work at company. And then we would also add in the company, and I work at a company that is called Smash Reality. So also just to make you guys aware, I'm using a plugin in my editor that's called Prettier, and what it does is sometimes when I save, it will auto format for me, so that way if a line ends up getting too long, it'll do automatic indentation for me. So if you end up looking at the projector and you look at your screen and look back and it looks way different, I apologize. It'll automatically format it so that way it is easier to read. Hopefully that'll benefit you guys. So in this case, we just added company, and I have my name, and we could also put, you want to what? Let's actually make company a little bit more complex. So instead of having a company name, we're going to have company as an object. So in this case, we're going to wrap it in squiggly brackets. And the company has a name, and it has a city that it's in. So I work in Collingwood. So when I reference this, because now my About Us page is just referencing the object of company, it will actually print out what is called object. So you'll see right here, in square brackets says object. So that's kind of just like what ends up happening. The way that you can get around that is if you wanted to print out everything, you could do what is called stringifying, which is converting your object into just a string value of showing what it is, or you could just reference the part that you actually need. So in this case, I would say I work at company.name in company.city. I save that again and open Chrome and refresh. And now it says I work at Smash Reality in Collingwood. So as you guys can imagine, you can really just pass anything into the res.render object and do some sort of information or calculation based on that. So I can say years, or I'll just put age. I'll put another H4 that says I am and I am graduating from So now I've put in that well, I have already graduated, but in this case, you guys will be graduating hopefully at the end of this semester. So I said I am graduating from college.program, which means that in here, we need to add college and program, and I graduated from the COPA program. So refresh, and then we have all of our information in there. But we might want to have a little bit more complex information. So something that we worked with last week is working with an array. So we might want to pass, say, some stuff that we like. So we can have likes. And in this case, we're going to use an array. We're just going to use some strings for some basic stuff. But I like cats. I like Rocket League. I like React. And I like food. I don't know if you guys have seen me. I like food.
I have yet to be in a class where cats has not come up.
I have 2 cats. It's my first time having cats. So I was super excited when I got to do that. So in here, we can do a couple different things. So I can say I like, and then we can just put likes. And this will format it. But as you can see that there's no spaces between it, which doesn't really make sense. So in here, what we're going to do, and just to show you guys again, so there's the pug.js, I believe it's pug.js.org. Yes, pug.js.org is where there's the references on how to use pug. So in this case, we have iteration because we're going to be dealing with a bunch of different values. But as you can see here, we don't actually want to create new elements. So what we'll do here we can put might be able to put a period. Yeah. So we put a period, and that means that everything that is tabbed inside of that will be, will go inside of the H4. So in here, we're going to use an each. So each value that is in the array, we want to put that there. So I can say, actually, what might just be easiest is just to create a variable right above it. We'll do that. Or, hold on. I'm going to make this a div. And say each thing in, is it likes? It's likes. Span equals thing. So now that we need to put a that. It's so now we can have a comma separated list of what's there, and I'll just make this a span as well. So there's a bunch of different ways that you could end up doing this, but this is the most basic way that we'll just do it for now. But yeah, so it's really all we need to do for About Us. We don't need to go in a bunch of detail on who we are. All we need to know is that we pass this information into this object as the second parameter in the render function that contains everything that we want to access inside the view. So now we might want to set up a contact form. So on some sites, I'm sure you've seen, sometimes they just post their contact information, like here's our phone number, here's our fax, for people that still use fax in 2019, or an email or something like that. And then other sites I'm sure you've seen use a contact form. So contact forms are equally as pretty easy to deal with. In any other language that you guys have seen, if you need me to switch which file that I have open, just let me know. I see you guys kind of just squinting at the projector, so just let me know. Actually, right now, I will take everything that I just did and put it on GitHub. So this is our About Us page, and I'm going to push it up. Okay, so now that we've done our About Us page, we might want to work on the Contact Us page. So in the same way that I did on the About Us page, I'm going to put everything in a container. So it says Contact Us. And then I'm going to do a form of method is post. So as you know, there's two different ways that you can submit a form. You can either submit a form using a get method, which means that it will put the different form values in the URL, or you can use a post method, which will send a request to the, well, to this case, to the route with the information that you have filled in the form. So if we were to do an input of type is text, and its name is going to be name, and we'll do a placeholder of your name, and save that, and refresh. So you'll see that now we have that. And of course, the second main important part of a form is a button with a type of submit. And I'm going to put some classes on it of button primary. And we want to add the word submit. So typically when you're using Bootstrap, you put your inputs in a form control, so that way it does that. Oh, that looks awful. Maybe I'm missing something. Bootstrap. Is there an example? So here's a quick example of what it should look like. And forms. Oh, it's a form group. So I'm just going to copy that, paste it here. So I'm going to use a form group with a label of name and where is it? Here we go. So we have our name, and we'll probably also want to have a email. So that way, when you submit a contact form, they would be able to get back to you, because of course the form is not, or just having a name is not very helpful. So in this case, we'll have a type of email with a name of email, and I'm going to actually lowercase all these names, so that way it makes it a little bit easier. And example at domain.com. And for an input, oh, sorry, the form control is actually on the input. That's why. So we want .form control, .form control. And you don't necessarily need to add these classes to it. It's just purely for the Bootstrap styling. So if you're cool with just regular styling, then that's totally okay. But when I go in and refresh, so now that looks a little bit cleaner. So we have a name, we have an email, and now if we wanted of message with an or not an input, we want a text area, form control, name is message, ooh, is it not? Form group. Oh, apparently I can't spell. Okay. And we're going to put rows to being, let's do 4 rows, just so that it makes it a little bit bigger. So in here, we can now put in our name. And then our message. And then we can click submit. And you'll see that we now get a 404. So the reason why we get a 404 is we've set up /contact us for a GET request, but we've not actually set it up for a POST request. So in order to handle that, this is now where we go into our route. And we can copy this and use a POST request. And we can say we'll give it a status of success is true. And if you guys are familiar in Bootstrap, there is, what is it called? These alerts. There we go. So we're going to take an alert that just says that the form has been submitted. And we'll just put that right here. So it's .alert success, role is alert, and put that there. So now on our contact us page, it's going to say that your message has been sent. By refreshing inside here, you'll see it says your message has been sent. But of course, we only want that to show up once a user has submitted the form. So just like we've dealt with other variables, you can also do an if statement inside of your view. So you could do 2 different things. You could either render a different view, which would be kind of silly because then you'd have duplicated content, or in this case, you could just use an if statement of if success, and you tab that inside of it. So now it's not there. Fill in some content, I hit submit. Now it says your message has been sent. So just to quickly show you, if you missed it, we're using a variable that is called success, which is passed only inside of our post route. Right here you see success is true. If I were to actually pass this as false, this would check if success is true. So if you were to, for some reason, have an error, like for some reason there's some sort of logic on the back end that ends up being unable to send that request, you could do something else and say like your message, there was an error sending your message or something similar. But of course, still on the default view, before they send their message, you don't want to show anything. So if I were to refresh this, put in some information, and hit submit, nothing pops up because right now we've set that value to being false. So I'll set that back to being true. But right now, we're not doing anything with that information. So it might be a good idea in order to see what has been submitted. And a good way of doing that would be to display that message to the user, at least for now. Usually you would do some sort of back-end process to deal with it, usually by sending like an email to whoever this contact us is going to go to, as well as sometimes you do a confirmation email to the user. Instead of having a pop-up saying that that email has been sent, you send them an email saying like, your message has been sent. You know, if it's a contact form for, say, IT, it's usually an automated message that says we've received your ticket. And then that way, you know, the user knows that everything has worked as expected. So in this case, we've done a lot of stuff with the response object, which is right here. So this is kind of the first case where we're actually going to be dealing with the request object. So the request is going to be containing all of our information that is sent from that form. So as you guys are familiar with, when you submit a form, it's called the body, or the body of the request. So in here, I can actually get the request.body. And if I were to console log the body, provided that everything is working as expected, should be able to fill this all out, submit, open up my terminal, and you can see right here is where everything has been submitted. So we have object null prototype. Don't know what's going on with that. But you get to see the information that's been submitted from the form. So this is where you would end up. As I said, you could either send off an email or something similar. In this case, what we can do is we can save it to a file, which we haven't done any sort of files yet, but it might be a good thing to show. So inside here, as I mentioned, when you use Node.js, there is a bunch of different packages that come with it. So one of them being what is called FS, which is for the file system. So the thing that we're going to be using is a write stream, which really the easiest thing. I'm sure you guys do this all the time, but write to file node.js and probably find some sort of tutorial. So you can see I have purple links. So we can actually just use write file. So we require in the FS module for file system, and we write to a file with this is its path. This is what's going to be written into it.
Is that file something that we need to have already created, or if it doesn't exist, really create the file?
In some cases it does, but not always. So usually if the file doesn't exist, it will usually create that file, but not if the folder doesn't exist. It doesn't create the folders that, so if I created like A, B, C, it won't create those folders, but it usually does create the file. But typically, as you guys know, there's not a lot of file writing that you usually end up doing. Usually it's more you write to a database, so you don't have to worry about local stuff.
Yeah.
So, but good question. We can actually figure that out right now. So when we require in the FS module, down here we have our post request where we will want to fs.write file. So we're going to write to a file that's called submitted, and we can actually just take the request.body that was sent. We don't have to do anything to it, but in this case I'm going to stringify it, so that way it will most likely just put it all on one line. And then we want to create a function that comes back with an error and data, if that's right. It's probably right, I trust myself. just error. Okay. So as I mentioned, I can't remember if it was last week or the first week, but in JavaScript, there's a bunch of different ways of dealing with a asynchronous task. And an asynchronous task is where you don't know when it's going to finish. So it can either take a second, it could take 5 seconds, or it could take like, 1 millisecond. You don't necessarily know how long a task is going to take. So, in this case, when we write to this file, we don't know how long it's going to take. So what ends up happening is we write to this file that's called submitted.txt. We are putting in the request body from our form, and then this function that's right here ends up getting called after the fact. And because we don't know when it finishes, we also don't necessarily know if it has an error or not. So in this case, we check if there's an error, because if there is no error, it will just pass undefined, which kind of gets a little bit complicated in JavaScript. But for simplicity's sake, if there's no error, it means that it finished successfully. So we can just check if an error is there. And if it is, we can actually respond back. So I'm just going to copy this and say that there's a failure. So put that in a... So if there's an error, we want to return response.render the contact us with a failure of true. Now, because we're returning, we don't necessarily have to use an else statement, but we can. So I'm going to do that. Oops, sorry.
How's it going?
Hey, Scott. So in here, we end up writing to the file submitted.txt. And if there's an error, we end up rendering the contact us page with a failure of true. And otherwise, we end up, it means that it was successful. So we do success true. And now if we run this inside of our contact form, so we can just enter in our name, example@domain.com, and our message, and we click submit, we get that it was successful. So let's see, where did it put that file? It might not have actually done the file. Scott, you jinxed me. You told me when stuff doesn't work, and it's right as you walk in.
Sorry, I'm really sorry to interrupt.
No, it's all right.
After you just wrapped up, I can help you with the Blackboard merge.
Absolutely.
Are you parked out?
I walk, so I can just meet you at your office or whatever.
Okay, I'll be out of the office.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. It created it right here at the root of the. So you can see right here, this is our message that we had that we did. And if we were to, let's do a different name. So Dylan at example.com with a message and submit that. That one failed. So we haven't handled any sort of failure yet. So inside of our contact form, we should actually throw in a check. So if failure, we want to do an alert of alert danger with a roll of alert. There was a failure. So as you can see right here, it doesn't actually say what that is. But if I, inside of our index file, we can actually just console log the error. And then this way it will show us in our terminal what the error was. So you can see that it has permission denied to submitted.txt. So the reason is I actually just changed that. So it needs to have this period in front of it, otherwise it thinks that it's using an absolute pathing. So if I redo this, so you can see it was a success, and inside here is our message that we just submitted. So this would be, again, very similar, either inserting into a database, sending off an email, really any sort of form submission is done usually like this, unless if you're working with a front-end framework. But for simplicity's sake, this is what we're doing. But as you can see, there's some duplicated stuff here that we could end up simplifying. So we could just end up doing this instead. So we don't want to check if there's an error. We only want to return the contact page. But in this case, if there's a failure, it means that there's an error, and we can just do a check. And we can do a success that there is no error. You don't have to necessarily do it like this. You can just put error and no error. But in this case, if error, let me actually make that error. If there is an error, it's not going to be true or false. It will have the message of what the error message is. So if we wanted, we could spit out the message. So in this case, it's true, but if I do make it fail, you can see here that it said that there was an error for printing to the file. So I guarantee that that was probably a little quick. But if we were to kind of just quickly go over what we did here, we already have the get for the route that we're on. But we set up a second route that is for handling the post request. And that comes in as request.body. And here we end up creating a variable that's called body, but we don't actually use it, so we can just remove that. And then using the file system module that's a part of Node, we write to a file that's called submitted.txt. We end up stringifying the response body, and then it comes back, this callback is the function that gets run after we finish writing to the file. And if there is an error, we end up passing failure. So if this is true, then failure will be true. And this just does the opposite. So if there is no error, success is true, but if there is an error, then success is false. And then we also pass our title. So inside of here, this is fine because if success is not passed, and same thing with failure, then it won't actually render what's in here because we're just doing a check. If we did not pass success and we did not pass failure, you'll see here it actually renders both of them. And the reason being is because it's checking that not there is, it's what is called a truthy value. So JavaScript is a little bit different compared to some other programming languages like C# and Java, where when you're checking something, you know if it's going to be a Boolean or not. But in this case, something can just be undefined, meaning that if it's truthy, it means that it's there, and if it's falsy, it means that it's not there. JavaScript has a little bit of quirks with it, but sometimes it can be a blessing and other times it can be a hindrance. So, but if we just hide those so we can see that we have our name, our email, and our message. So the last page that we still have to do is the products page. And if anyone still needs the code for the contact us page, I am going to commit it up. So we have our About Us, Contact, Now Products. So in this case, we're going to be using our, one sec. So now we're going to be using our products route. So in this case, when we go to /products, it renders the products view, and it doesn't pass anything. So we're going to just create some really easy and simple products as an array. So we're going to have one product that will have an ID of 1. It'll have a name of skateboard. It has a price of, we'll say, I'm going to do it as a string just to make it easier. It's going to be $20.99 and a description of it's a skateboard. And now we're going to want to create multiple products. So I'm just going to copy this a couple times. ID of 2, ID of 3. Instead of a skateboard, we could do skis. Skis are great at Blue Mountain, and they're going to be $27.99. And maybe a snowboard, and perfect for.
Or you shop, let me know. And this stuff's cheap.
I know. It's they're all knockoffs. They're all made of cheap plastic. And this snowboard, due to popular demand, is going to be $999. So we're now passing an array of objects into our products page. So if we were wanting to display these, typically, I mean, you guys have probably used Amazon and other e-commerce sites. Usually it's either in a grid view or it's in like a list view. So because we're using Bootstrap, we're just going to do a quick grid. It's actually been a really long time since I've used a Bootstrap grid. Gotcha. Cool. So we create a row, and we want that row to have the items in it. So in here, we can actually get rid of this. So we want this to be, are we passing a title? We're not passing a title. So we want to pass a title of our products. And then from there, this is where we're going to want to start displaying our products to the user. So we're going to create a row. And then in here is where we do our for each loop, or like just it's just an each loop. So for each product that's in products is where we're now going to want to start displaying information. So we could just do a p tag of product.name. And if I were to refresh that, see we have skis, so we need to just do a column small and we'll change this to being, let's do an h5 tag or h4 tag with a paragraph of product.description. And I believe Bootstrap also has text green, I think. Might not work. Might. So now we have these in a column, and when we re-render, see, that doesn't work. But we end up having our products here. So of course, this isn't very helpful because it's just very basic information. And we can't, if we wanted to see more information about what this product is, we would need a button. So we can end up creating a button, or sorry, let's create an anchor tag with a class of button. And button, I think it's button secondary is what they call it now. And we want this to go to /products/ and we're going to use these backticks instead and do product.id. View more details. So just for those of you that might have a hard time being able to see this, we end up using the backtick that is right beside the 1 on the keyboard, and this allows us to inject variables into our string instead of having to usually use concatenation with a plus symbol. So this just makes it a little bit easier, although I say that, but you might not necessarily agree if you're not familiar with the syntax, but once you start to get used to it, it does make it really easy to inject more and more. So now we have a view more details, and as you can see, I can't really bump it up anymore, but right here you can see that it goes to products/1. And if you've copied this onto your computer and you hover over it, you'll see it. This goes to products 2 and this goes to products 3. So if I click on it, you'll see we go to products 3, go to products 2, we go to products 1. So we could really make as many products as we want, but we'll just kind of stick with 3 for right now just to make it a little bit easier. So if we wanted to be able to grab and just show that product information on a product, what would be like a details page, having these products inside only this route is not helpful. So if this was in a actual application, usually you would end up making a database call to get a list of products from the database. Sometimes 10, 20, doesn't really matter. But you would make a call to get the information, and then you would pass it in. So you wouldn't actually have to hand write all of this. That wouldn't be all too helpful. So up above, I'm going to create a variable that's called products, and I'm going to pass it right here. So I've created it outside of the route, so that way I can access it in other routes as well. So, and as I've mentioned before, shorthand syntax, because this products variable exists up here, it will do the same thing as passing it like this. It's just a shorthand, and when I save it, oh, it didn't actually remove it that time. Okay, cool. So you pass it like that, so the key is products, and the value is the value of the products. But when we go into the details page, we need to now figure out which product that we're trying to grab, because this uses an ID parameter. So this is now where it starts to get a little bit trickier, because we can't just hard code what we're wanting to send to the user. So in this case, we want to create a variable of product, and we want to figure out in here which product it is. So in this case, arrays have a find function where it will loop over the products. So we want so what this is doing is kind of similar to like a for loop where we would loop over all of the elements that are in it, and when we find the product that we want, then we just stop. But in this case, arrays have this handy function of being able to find what we want. So we say that we want to have a, where the, oh, sorry. This will return either true or false. So if it returns true, then it means that you have found the correct product. But if it returns false, it means that it go to the next product that is in it. So in this case, we want to take the request. And in order to access this variable of ID, we use request.params and then .id. And that ID being the same name of the variable that's right here. And because, just like everything else, it'll be converted into a string automatically, we need to just convert it to a number. So now if I just console log, oh sorry, did I click skateboard? I might have clicked. That's interesting. Okay. Goes to 3. Okay. So this is a good debugging. So skateboard. Why is it doing that? It has the correct ID. Hold on, let's go to array find. So it ends up returning the first element that returns true. So we'll console log request.params, refresh. So in here, it's an ID of 3. And find returns the value of the first element in the array that satisfies the provided testing function. Otherwise, undefined is returned. So in this case, we would, let's console log prod.id and console log wanted ID equals number request.params.id. And we're going to console log the wanted ID. So, oh, sorry, okay. Who would like to tell me what my error is? If anyone has seen it before, then. But, so the issue that I'm doing here is I'm actually assigning our params ID to, so to quickly explain, we have our products here that we are looping over. So on the very first one, we get a variable that's called prod, which will be our skateboard. So as you can see up here, we have skateboard with a price and all that sort of stuff, but its ID is 1. However, because when I do an assignment, I end up assigning prod.id and I change it, what is called mutating. So I mutate the ID to being the number that we just found. And because when I do that, it ends up actually returning true. So in this case, I've now changed what that value is, and then it returned true. So that's why the ID is different. So if I end up doing, you're supposed to do triple equals is the easiest because it will compare both type and value. So now if I remove that and refresh, we now have the snowboard. So now if I were to change this to being 2, and look, it's actually now skis. So I'm going to just push this up to GitHub, and we'll just do another quick 10-minute break. And then, unless if you guys want to just push through for maybe 15, 20 minutes.
And then leave early, yeah.
Yeah, and then you guys can leave early if that's what you want. So we'll just quickly do this then. So now that we're on our products page, we want to be able to display the product that we just got. So again, we'll just put in product. We can get rid of that console log. And sorry for anyone that might have copied this. I'm just going to put this back to being what it was before. As I said, JavaScript has a bunch of different syntaxes to do something, and I thought I might have, like, I don't typically use a function in this way, so I thought maybe I had done some logic errors there. But anyway, so again, so we have an ID. It comes in as request.params.id. That's how you reference anything that is in here as a parameter. But if I were to have a parameter up here called params, and it ends up getting to here, it won't actually exist because it only exists in the scope of your function of a get or a post or anything. So router.get, we have our ID that is our wanted ID. So I'm going to change this now to wanted ID. So we end up making sure we want to find the product where its ID matches the ID that was entered in the URL. And then we end up responding back the product view in our views, product.pug, with a value of product that is equal to the value of product that we just found in our array. So inside of here is now where we would display our product. So let's throw it in a container and an h1 of product.name. We'll do an h3 of product.price, and we'll do an h6 of product.description. And save it. And I'm also going to put in a back button. That will just put us back to products and say go back. So now we can go here, skis, we can see our ski information, go back, skateboard, go back, snowboard, go back. And this is the way that you can really make like a pretty simple site and of course get more and more advanced as we want. So is there any questions about what we have done in this class? Yes. The products.pug. The string for the href?
I just missed the like how to get them to display.
Okay, yeah. So in here, we just have our anchor tag with an href, and from here, this is where we have the product.id, which when we're looping over everything, we'll just view more details. That's what you were looking for? Okay. Is there any other questions? Concerns? Worries?
Nope.
Okay. Well, that is it. There is not going to be a lab because, as I said, right now we're currently ahead. This was mostly just to kind of go more in depth on Node.js with Express. We'll probably be going over some of this again next week. So if it doesn't make sense now, it might make sense next week. But of course, feel free to ask me any questions either in class or after class. And sorry? Sorry?
Lynda.com?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Super helpful.
But yeah, so that's it. I'm going to be pushing up this code to GitHub, which if you need is in weekly learning for week 3. So I will just add this. Yes, so when I get you into the class,
I don't have to do anything?
no, you'll be all good.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome. Have a good week.
You
Well,
as-
weekend. I'll see you next week.
See you. Bye.
Yeah.
Is there something that converts HTML into Express?
Can do HTML in Express.
You know, convert it into, so instead of having the open and close tags, it just takes those away. And
Yes. If you just type in, so HTML to pug,
okay.
and it's just called HTML to Jade, and you can just paste it in here and it will put it on the other side. That's what I used earlier in class. So if, yeah. But just to kind of partially correct your thing, Pug is the templating engine, so anything that is HTML related will be in there, but any sort of programming is done on the Node side, which is where Express comes in. So your question is more converting HTML to Pug and not HTML to Express, just to make sure that there's no confusion on that.
All right.
How to attach images?
Sorry?
How to attach images in it?
So when using Pug, you can do it the exact same way as you would anything else. Let's see. So if you wanted to put in an image, you would create image like that, and then you would put in a source equal to, so let's grab an image of skateboard. I'll just copy the link. So in here, I'm going to just create an image that's that. Oop, there we go. So we have a skateboard. We want skis. And lastly, we need a image of a snowboard. So we have snowboard, grab the image address. It's another one. Okay, so now that that is all in here, we can just end up doing product.image. So source is getting the value from product.image that's passed to it. That makes sense? Yep. And then when I refresh and go into here, we have our snowboard, we have our skis, we have our ginormous skateboard. So of course you'd have to do additional styling just to make sure that it stays within widths that you want, or have an image that you know what the expected file size or the width and height is going to be. But and then of course you could just do that with anything that's like hard-coded or whatever. But this is how you end up taking a dynamic route and being able to just display the different content based on it. So Okay. So now all that code is up on GitHub, including the images for the products. We just go. So here. So you can go in, clone it, being able to see what we do. As you can see, there's a lot of parts in the project that don't end up getting changed when we do an express generate. We may at some point end up doing some work with this www file, which is what actually requires in our app. And this is what starts the HTTP server, so that way we don't have to do it. But we might do some stuff with there. But anyway, that's mostly it.